300-pound dudes tackling you on a frozen field, the last thing you want to do is stay out there. Believe me, the Rams players were thinking about the jacuzzi at their team hotel, that they find it laughable, but more laughable if they totally disregard the trade whatsoever. This guy has transformed the balance of power in the Eastern Conference. And you could argue the entire defense is going to be absolutely ferocious next year. But if your number one priority is to win a Super Bowl, then J.J. Watt is making a grave mistake. To ride this Chad Henne experiment for an entire game, I might need a whole bottle of Hennessy just to get through that. Guy who's won 8 division titles, who's made 5 AFC championship appearances, who's reached the Super Bowl 3 times and has won 2 Super Bowls for this organization. Aaron Rodgers has only won 1 Super Bowl with Green Bay. Drew Brees has only won 1 Super Bowl with New Orleans. There's only 13 quarterbacks in NFL history that have won multiple Super Bowls, and Big Ben is one of those individuals. Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe right here on J&J Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitter, and on YouTube. I'm Jonah Malkin with you every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Boy, what a weekend it was in sports with the Masters making history. Some news in Philadelphia with Jalen Hurts. Is he, in fact, going to be their long-term solution at the quarterback position? Well, there seems to be some question marks surrounding that. Some news out of Golden State with the Warriors. A lot to unpack, but we start with the Brooklyn Nets and the LA Lakers matching up in what was supposed to be an NBA primetime Saturday night game on ABC. Right? These were supposed to be the 2 best teams in the NBA. And there are always these games between elite teams in the NBA that always provide shocking results. That there's sometimes just unfathomable results that you can't pinpoint exactly why. The Clippers lost to the Mavericks at home during the first couple games of the year, lost by 51 points. The Raptors beat the Golden State Warriors by 53, 130 to 77. At one point, they led by 61 points. There's certain games between elite teams that are just blowouts. And you can't rationalize it. You can't pinpoint exactly why, but they happen. And my finals preview, my finals prediction was the Los Angeles Lakers and the Brooklyn Nets. When the schedule came out, especially when the second half of the schedule came out, when it was released, I marked this game down on my calendar. I said Brooklyn Nets and the Los Angeles Lakers in the second meeting of the year at the Barclays Center. That is going to be the number 1 game marked on my calendar. That is the number 1 marquee matchup of the year. Why? Because normally the second time you play a team, you get to kind of hone in on your mistakes. You get to address how the first outcome went. And understandably, the first outcome was just a terrible game. The Brooklyn Nets absolutely destroyed the Lakers. Anthony Davis wasn't playing in that game, and Kevin Durant wasn't playing in that game, but it was still LeBron and the crew versus Kyrie, Harden, and company. And the Lakers lost in terrible fashion. The Nets were scorching hot from 3. They looked unbeatable. James Harden was still assimilating into the offense, into the Brooklyn Nets. And this was a statement game for Brooklyn, not just to the Lakers, but to the NBA, that this was a reality check. Hey, we're coming. The Brooklyn Nets have arrived, and they are coming. That was the statement that they made back in that win against the Lakers when they swept their 7-game road trip. And so I had higher expectations for round 2. I expected Anthony Davis to be fully healthy, to be playing in this game. No one could have foreseen LeBron suffering and sustaining a high ankle sprain, so he would be out of this game. So all of the hoopla was justified because this was supposed to be the second matchup of the year before a potential finals preview. That's what we were all clamoring for. That's what we were hoping for. And you go into this game, and there's no James Harden. You still have Kyrie Irving. You still have Kevin Durant. And who's on the opposite side for the Lakers? Well, there's no LeBron. There's no Anthony Davis. There's no Kyle Kuzma. There's no Marc Gasol. And there's no Wesley Matthews. So the Lakers went into Brooklyn without those guys, without 5 of those guys, and they won by 25 points, 126 to 101. And for some context, for some perspective, the Lakers average 110 points per game all season. That's what their averages are. Those 5 players account for 70 of the 110 points that they score on average. 70 of the 110 points that the Los Angeles Lakers score on average in every single basketball game was absent from this matchup against the Brooklyn Nets. Think about that. That's over half. That's about 2/3 of your production, maybe more if I'm doing my math right, that you just don't have at your disposal. And of course, this game was going to be the nationally televised game. And to be honest, when I saw that 5 of these guys were missing and James Harden wasn't going to be playing, but KD was still going to be there, Kyrie was still going to be playing, I didn't have much interest in watching. I figured this game would be a blowout. And lo and behold, I checked the score after the first quarter, 33-25. Check it at halftime. Wow. It's a 3-point lead, 61-58. The Nets are probably just revving up. They'll turn on the switch. And you look up at the scoreboard, and it's 88-71 towards the end of the third quarter. And I had this incredulous look, and I was in awe, in disbelief, looking at the television set saying, the Lakers are going to win this game. Despite all these odds, despite their depleted roster, despite 70 of their 110 points not being active tonight, the Los Angeles Lakers are going to beat this team on the road. And I vigorously attempted to try and downplay this game. I didn't want to look too much into it. I tried to rationalize why the Nets lost, why they couldn't hit from 3, why they were struggling offensively. And I didn't want to be nearsighted. I didn't want to be parochial. And I wanted to take a step back and say, pump the brakes, Jonah. This is just a regular season game. This is irrelevant. And I can't. I simply can't. Because when you look at the odds of this game and who was playing and who was not playing, it's unfathomable. By 25 points, you beat the hottest team in the NBA, your counterpart and your biggest adversary and your biggest foe on the Eastern Conference. You beat him by 25 on the road without 70 of your 110 points per game? Seriously? So, and let me be clear. This was not about the Brooklyn Nets dogging it. This was not about them being lackadaisical or being sluggish. They were induced into their struggles. They were induced into committing 19 turnovers. They were induced into being discombobulated offensively. This was not just a matter of, hey, we left our effort out the window. No, this was a desperate Lakers team that was looking to send a message with their role players to the rest of the league that, hey, if you want to win an NBA championship, you don't just have to go through LeBron and AD. You got to go through all of us as well. The depth was always the biggest question mark when we looked at the Lakers, when we looked at Frank Vogel and we looked at Rob Pelinka. How would you support LeBron and AD through a regular season, let alone a postseason? And this game meant more to the Lakers' ancillary pieces than it did to clearly the Brooklyn Nets, which was a huge, huge confidence boost for a team that prior to a couple weeks ago, they were reeling. So, again, let me be clear. This was not the Brooklyn Nets just dogging it. This was not about them just not having juice, not having energy, not wanting to win this game. They wanted to win this basketball game, but the Lakers were able to just derail and stymie any momentum because of their defense and their execution. And that is why I've always said that this year, The Philadelphia 76ers are the only team that are going to have a chance, that is going to have a chance at knocking off the Brooklyn Nets, because their offense is so potent that what you need is a team that can execute at an extremely high level, at an extremely efficient level, but more importantly, can lock you up on defense. And that's why the Philadelphia 76ers have the best chance. They've got a legit MVP candidate in Joel Embiid. They've got a top 7 defense in the league. Their 2 best players, Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons, are elite two-way players. They've got depth. They've got shooting. They added Danny Green and Seth Curry, who have come in and provided stretching the floor, provided space for those guys to operate. Now, do I think they're going to beat the Brooklyn Nets in a 7-game series? No, I do not. I still have the Nets reaching the finals, but they pose the biggest obstacle to them because of their defensive intensity and pressure. And that's what the Lakers showed was, hey, if you ramp up your defense, your defensive intensity, and you execute on offense, you can beat this team. Now, again, whether it'll be 4 out of 7 times, I don't know, but at least it's a recipe, just like the Kansas City Chiefs. I'll be the first to admit, I thought that if they had a healthy and robust offensive line, they would have beaten the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the Super Bowl. They didn't. They had a porous and banged up offensive line, and they got blown out 31-9. But because of that, the Buccaneers, it was their defense that ramped up so much of the pressure on Patrick Mahomes that they didn't allow that Kansas City Chiefs offense to even get a head start. They didn't allow them to rev up a bit. And that's the important takeaway here. The Lakers held the Brooklyn Nets to 43.5 shooting from the floor and held them to their lowest scoring output over the past 8 games in 101 points. So the Nets' struggles weren't just simply because they couldn't hit shots. They were struggling to shoot. Why did they struggle to hit shots? Because of the defensive pressure from the Lakers. That has to be the recipe moving forward. THT, Talen Horton-Tucker, career high 11 assists. Ben McLemore, who I told people scoffed at me. They balked at what I had to say. I said Ben McLemore was going to be a difference maker for the Lakers this year. I thought he was a huge, underrated free agent signing mid-season, and he hit 5 3-pointers in the game. Andre Drummond, 20 points, 11 rebounds. That height, the advantage that he had against LaMarcus Aldridge and Blake Griffin, he's basically rendered, not just Andre Drummond, but Drummond, Joel Embiid, they've basically rendered DeAndre Jordan useless. DeAndre Jordan doesn't play anymore. And so that's going to be the advantage for some of these teams. But again, it's because of their ability to execute well and ramp up their defensive pressure and intensity. So psychologically, this was a huge win and a message to the locker room that just imbues more confidence into these Lakers role players. And if they continue to get that type of intensity and execution, I'm not even talking about production, I'm talking about intensity on the defensive end and executing when you're open, then they're going to be set. Because this was just a mind-boggling game that, again, left me in utter disbelief. Another move in the NBA that left me in utter disbelief was that baseball star Alex Rodriguez and billionaire Marc Lore are finalizing a deal to purchase the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Minnesota Lynx from Glenn Taylor. This is actually a huge story that I don't think has been getting enough coverage. Just to put some things into perspective, Glenn Taylor, to his credit, lifted he resuscitated the Minnesota Timberwolves organization. This was an organization that didn't attain much success, and he came in and purchased the team for $88 million. In fact, they were on their way out to New Orleans, and he saved them and allowed them to flourish in Minnesota, was the owner for 26 years. The issue was he has missed the playoffs in 16 of his last 17 seasons, and they've only They've only surpassed the first round. They've only exceeded the first round of the playoffs one time in his tenure. So why is this important? Now, obviously, he's actually had a lot of success with the Minnesota Lynx, but why is this important? One of my favorite adages is when one door closes, another door opens. Right? It's always 5 o'clock somewhere. And the trend nowadays, for whatever reason, seems to be that former athletes who are trying to claim ownership stakes in major sports franchises, for whatever reason, are struggling to claim ownership stakes for sports that they played in, of their respective sports, for whatever reason. LeBron obviously is aspiring to be an owner of an NBA team. And right now, he has a small ownership stake in the Fenway Sports Group, who owns the Boston Red Sox, who own the Liverpool Football Club. So he's got a baseball team under his belt and a soccer team under his belt, but he's an NBA star, right? Alex Rodriguez and J-Lo, when they were still together, they tried to purchase the New York Mets. And instead, it kind of fizzled and flamed out. And Steve Cohen made a better offer and was sold the team. So it's interesting that ultimately you have a baseball player, former baseball star, who's now owning an NBA team. And I think part of the reason why there's been many obstacles for these athletes is because when you look at a guy in Michael Jordan, who, as great as he was as a basketball player and pretty universally recognized as the greatest basketball player of all time, he owns the Charlotte Hornets. Now they're called the Charlotte Hornets. At the time that he purchased them in 2010, or at least claimed the majority ownership stake in 2010, they were the Charlotte Bobcats. Because it's safe to say that he hasn't maybe attained a great deal of success, and by all accounts and standards has kind of been, up until this point, a poor owner of the Hornets. Again, with the exception of drafting LaMelo Ball, that was maybe the only positive thing that he's really done as an owner of the Charlotte Hornets. I think because of that, that's rubbed off on some of the other owners, and maybe some of the other people don't feel like athletes can represent their team and can own a team really at an effective level and operate them at a high level. I think that's an unfair stigma, and I think that this is a huge opportunity because Michael Jordan really blazed a trail now for more athletes to start to claim ownership stake. And so when we think about how NBA teams make money, because this is really important. When you think about how NBA teams make money, there are about 3 to 4 primary ways: TV revenue, merchandise, sponsorship, and ticket sales. Those are the 4 main ways that NBA teams make money. Now, when you think about why do free agents sign with teams? The main reasons, first of all, they're attracted to the city. They're attracted to the team and to the city. They've got intriguing and talented players. But I would almost argue that to a greater degree, they want to see competency in the front office, and they want to see owners that are involved, that are big name personalities, that have clout and have deep pockets. That's what's really important. And when you look at Alex Rodriguez is a personality. Sure, he's a baseball star. Non-baseball fans know who Alex Rodriguez is. They know who he is. And he hasn't dribbled a basketball in the NBA one time. Doesn't matter. They know who he is because he's a mogul and he's one of the greatest athletes in his respective sport, in baseball. A perfect example, when you look at the Golden State Warriors, when did they attain their most success? When did they have this tremendous run? Why did the Clippers all of a sudden be lifted up out of the depths of purgatory and mediocrity into some relevancy is when Jerry West became the president of basketball operations, or in the Clippers instance, became a lead consultant, a part of their front office group. Jerry West is adored. Jerry West wields tremendous power, has a ton of clout. That is why he's a personality. He is one of the main attractions. And when you then shift it to, okay, why do fans flock to the games? Why do fans always purchase merchandise? The players are a big draw, but it's the people that are a part of the team. Think about the Knicks when Phil Jackson was the president of basketball operations. Phil Jackson wasn't even playing. He wasn't even coaching, and the Knicks still had great attendance when he was the president of basketball operations. The Knicks stinked. And in fact, he proved to be one of the most incompetent front office people in recent memory. And yet, despite that, despite their struggles, people still attended the games because it was Phil Jackson. They wanted to see, how would this team look under this new regime? Could Phil Jackson inspire this group of guys, this coaching staff? Will some of his knowledge be given, be shared, and be executed with these players? That's why people came to see these games. And it's the same thing, I think, can apply to Alex Rodriguez being the owner here. And then here's the third thing. How do teams get showcased on television? Do you have entertaining and intriguing characters? Television is a show. They want to draw viewers in. That's how they make money. And when you have marquee names, when you've got marquee figures that are the gravitational pull, that are the ones that draw in fans, that induce people to watch your team. Sure, Alex Rodriguez, again, hasn't played basketball in the NBA, but fans and viewers will be anxious to see, how does his team look under his leadership? How does this team execute under his leadership? You look at the Miami Marlins. They're owned by Derek Jeter, a baseball legend with the New York Yankees. The Miami Marlins have stunk. They haven't reached the postseason since 2003, which was the last time they won the World Series. But it doesn't matter. They've missed the postseason for 18 straight years. It doesn't matter because Derek Jeter is the owner. People are still interested in the team. They're still invested in the team. And so for me, I think that when you pair a big-time personality and a big-time brand like Alex Rodriguez that carries that clout, who can be the sole individual that will draw in viewers, that will draw in fans, that I think can entice players to want to sign with him, and you pair that with a guy in Marc Lore who's a billionaire that can provide the majority of the financial capital, I think that's a recipe for success. So I'm looking forward to the two of them moving forward with this purchase, and I think that they can achieve some great deal of success together. And I want to transition now to a team that had experienced success, now is in the depths of non-success, you could say. I don't want to say completely failure. It's not completely failure. But the Golden State Warriors, their number 2 overall pick, James Wiseman, unfortunately, he suffered a slight tear in his right meniscus a couple days ago. And unfortunately, the NBA gods have clearly wanted to delay the Warriors' reign and supremacy over the NBA and basically continue their misery. And they want that misery to persist even longer, because this is the wildest roller coaster of a ride over a 3-year span that I think I've ever witnessed in major sports. The type of euphoria, the type of high that the Warriors were on during those 5 years of reaching the finals, all 5 seasons, winning 5 NBA championships, has now just kind of perilously turned into utter calamity. because let's go back and look. So KD ruptures his Achilles in the finals against the Raptors. Klay Thompson then suffers a torn ACL. Both of them gone. Durant leaves in free agency, and he flees to the Brooklyn Nets. Steph Curry breaks his hand 5 games into the next season. Warriors plummet all the way to the worst record in the NBA. They draft Wiseman, number 2 overall, and then Klay Thompson ruptures his Achilles. And now Wiseman, who they just selected, suffers a tear in his right meniscus and is likely done, may be done, for the remainder of the season. And this is just another setback in what's been, again, just a tumultuous two seasons, bordering 3 seasons for the Golden State Warriors. And I don't think I've ever witnessed or experienced the highs and lows, the drastic highs and lows like this. I don't think I've ever witnessed this. And destiny can sometimes just be a total donkey behind, because I can't say this expletive on air, but you know exactly which word I'm thinking about, because to me, it's just almost cruel payback to this point. It's really just cruel payback. And here's what I've noticed about society when we react to arrogant, boastful, successful teams that have now experienced misery and failure. What I've noticed is we have a tendency to scrutinize, to chastise, to ridicule these players, to ridicule these teams until they really hit rock bottom, until they really experience failure, humility, being truly humbled to the point where you have no other option but to be humbled. We don't begin to cheer and root for you. We don't begin to extol your achievements, your accomplishments. Perfect example, Tiger Woods in golf. He was dominant in the sport of golf. During the height of his career, he was one of the most pompous golfers that we've ever experienced. One of the biggest trash talkers on the golf course that we've ever experienced. And once he was arrested numerous times, the fallout then ensued. I don't need to divulge all of that. We know what happened. And once he truly hit rock bottom, and the world got to see him hit rock bottom, then and only then did we begin to truly laud and cheer and root for him upon his return to glory, when he ultimately culminated his return with a Masters win and another major in what's been an illustrious career 2 years ago. Only then did we almost forget about his initial success, the arduous path he had to embark on, he had to endure. That's what people want to see from the Golden State Warriors, and that is why this vitriol and this animosity continues to persist, is because people and fans don't feel like the Warriors truly experienced rock bottom. They feel like they weren't truly humbled, because the first year that they didn't have success, they landed the number 2 overall pick in the NBA draft in James Wiseman. So it's, as an NBA fan, this is just crushing, because I'm a pure basketball fan and I love to see the Golden State Warriors play. I love to see Steph Curry play, and to have their season be derailed by what feels like just perpetual injuries sustained by some of their key players, and to see another wasted year of Steph Curry's prime, it's just a shame, because the type of stats, the type of season that he's having has been a magical, marvelous season. He's just extended his 30-point game streak to a career high 6. For this season, he's averaging 30 points, 5.5 rebounds, 6 assists. And he's sprinkling in over a steal a game. He's shooting 49% from the floor. He's shooting 41% from the three-point line on better than 11.5 three-point attempts per game. This guy's been absolutely sensational. And I had projected the Warriors, and I'd picked the Warriors to make the postseason, which they still theoretically could. But I picked them to finish as a 6 seed, to win a round in the playoffs. Again, under the assumption, I knew that Klay Thompson wasn't going to be playing, but under the assumption that all their other players were going to be healthy and active. And so it's just, when you see, and this is devastating for James Wiseman, who sure he's had a down season, and his playing time, his production, that's vacillated a bit. But it's just a shame from a basketball standpoint to see this team not be able to compete at full strength again for another year. So that's what I have to say about that. I mean, he just dropped 38 points in their win over the Houston Rockets last night, 125-101, 38 points, 8 for 15 from the three-point line. I mean, just incredible numbers. And not totally going to waste, but we're not fully appreciating what he's been doing. Morning Joe right here, J&J Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitter, and on YouTube, Mondays and Wednesday mornings, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. So the Masters created history. There was history that was involved at the Masters yesterday. Hideki Matsuyama won the Masters. He became the first Japanese man to win a men's golf major ever. So from a historical standpoint, this was just a shattering, a barrier shattering type of moment, a monumental moment in sports for him, for the country of Japan. And given the current climate that we're in, this was absolutely huge. So let me first just say, again, given the climate that we're in, the type of bigotry and hate crimes that have existed and that have persisted recently, especially aimed at the direction of Asian Americans, this was a huge victory for them to see a Japanese man be at the forefront, be at center stage of the sports world, and him to win a major. The storyline and the narrative is nothing short of spectacular and truly heartwarming. And I'm genuinely happy for Matsuyama that he won his first Masters ever. That's a huge, huge accomplishment. But this is my main reaction. Golf just isn't the same without Tiger Woods. It just isn't. The level of intrigue isn't there. I barely watched the Masters over the course of 4 days. I barely watched it. And it's not because I don't really like golf, even though I was never a huge avid fan, but Tiger was the main attraction. And so he's not playing. Dustin Johnson, who just won the Masters last year, didn't even make the cut. He didn't even make it to the weekend. Brooks Koepka, Rory McIlroy, even both of them didn't even make the cut. Justin Thomas didn't even finish in the top 20. Normally there are people, there are figures that draw you in. And even a character like Phil Mickelson wasn't really that relevant. He finished top 21. So sure, I like Jordan Spieth, and I picked him to win. And he's a fascinating player to watch. Jon Rahm, Justin Rose, Xander Schauffele. I like some of these guys, but I was never glued to the television. Those guys are not going to get me to postpone any type of event I'm doing to watch the television, to watch them play. And unfortunately, the same thing with Matsuyama. And so my biggest takeaway was, from a historical standpoint, I'm extremely happy for Matsuyama. I think it's an incredible accomplishment, an incredible message that he's sending. But when I think about my overall biggest takeaway, was it just was kind of underwhelming. and I haven't looked at the viewership numbers. I'm not sure off the top of my head what that was, but I can tell you this. I'm sure it wasn't nearly as high as it was when Tiger Woods won, or even last year when Dustin Johnson won, who's a bigger name, a bigger brand in golf. So again, Matsuyama had a tremendous tournament, finished 10 under 278, his 15th victory worldwide, a 6th on the PGA Tour. Tremendous individual accomplishment. But if I'm asking myself, hey, is Matsuyama in the future going to be a golfer that I am clamoring and salivating at the chance to watch? At this moment in time, not really. And that was kind of the biggest takeaway with that. But some big news in the NFL as we transition to football, especially given that the draft is fast approaching. The NFL draft is quickly approaching. In fact, I believe it is around April 31st to May 1st or April 30th. One of those days. It's coming up in about 2 weeks. Hard to believe. And some teams are starting to round into shape, turn that corner, and the Cleveland Browns continue to make moves this offseason. We've already seen what they've done with their defense, and now they are expected to potentially finalize a deal with Jadeveon Clowney, who was the former number 1 overall pick in 2014, was drafted by the Houston Texans, and they are potentially, the belief is that they will finalize a deal and a contract today, sometime today. And first, let me just say this. Jadeveon Clowney, he's coming off that lone season with the Titans. We understand he only played in 8 games. He was injured. He injured his knee in November, didn't return. Really wasn't that productive with the Tennessee Titans. 19 combined tackles, 4 pass deflections, a forced fumble, 6 quarterback hits in 8 games played. But we know a couple things. One, we know that the Browns seem to have gotten over that and gotten rid of that proverbial monkey off their back by making the postseason for the first time since 2002, which at the time had been the longest active streak of missing the postseason for an NFL franchise. So they're heading in the right direction. Their defense was a struggle, 17th in the NFL last year. But then again, the Tennessee Titans had the 5th worst defense in the NFL last year. But for me, when I look at Jadeveon Clowney, this is the prototypical number 1 overall pick type of player, a defensive end that is an absolute physical specimen, an absolute star. This guy is 6'5", 260 pounds, and he possesses all the traits to be a dominant player and to be a real impactful player and to be one of the best defensive players of all time. It just hasn't quite materialized. And that's been the biggest kind of disappointment in years past, was God's blessed you with all of these gifts, but we haven't reaped the rewards of it. We haven't seen you be extremely dominant yet. In fact, the only time that Jadeveon Clowney ever really sustained success was when he played alongside J.J. Watt, who will go down as perhaps a top 5 defensive player of all time, maybe top 3 defensive ends of all time. So when I think back to, okay, why is this? How is Jadeveon Clowney going to be impactful? I think part of the reason why he will be is because he has showed enough glimpses recently to prove that he can still be productive. In fact, when you look at his stats in 2017 and 2018, I realize that was over 2 years ago, but with Seattle or with the Houston Texans, 2017, 9.5 sacks in about 15 games. 2018, 9 sacks. That can work. Now in Seattle, obviously the production slipped. He recorded just 3 sacks that entire season. We get it. Last year with the Tennessee Titans, 0 sacks. I understand. But when we think back to when did Jadeveon Clowney achieved the most as a player, it's when he played alongside J.J. Watt. And now he's going to be playing alongside a guy in Myles Garrett, who's also now one of the best defensive players and defensive ends in the NFL, a guy who finished 6th in the NFL last year with 12 sacks. So I think that if there was ever a time to take a chance on a guy, and again, they're only going to be paying him, it's been reported to be roughly $6.5 million for a 1-year contract. I think that that's completely worth it if you're the Cleveland Browns, because this is a team that has gone out and has been aggressive on the defensive side of the ball. When you think to what the Cleveland Browns have done this offseason, they signed John Johnson and Troy Hill from the Rams, the free safety and the cornerback, so they buffed up their secondary. And now you pair Myles Garrett with Jadeveon Clowney. I think that if there was ever an opportunity for Clowney to flourish, now would be the situation where he's paired alongside another dominant defensive end. And so the Browns defense, even if you're getting just 75 to 50% of Jadeveon Clowney, I still think that can be enough to offset the potential issues he may come with, or the potential baggage that he may come with, or the lack of production, to me. So we'll see what happens, but I actually kind of like this move for the Cleveland Browns. If they are able to finalize this deal, I do think that he's someone that can continue to be productive. And this story just eats at my craw. So the Philadelphia Eagles, there was an article that came out yesterday that they are considering drafting a quarterback as an insurance plan to Jalen Hurts. So the Eagles are weighing their options, and potentially they may draft a quarterback for Jalen Hurts to be a backup to Jalen Hurts, or to at least light a fire and provide some competition. I'm not sure if the Eagles know who Albert Einstein is. Albert Einstein is a brilliant man, perhaps the most intelligent man that's ever walked on the face of the earth. And he defined iconically insanity as doing the same thing over and over again, but expecting a different result. The Eagles. This is deja vu. We've lived through this already. We experienced this last year. Did you not see what happened to Carson Wentz when you drafted Jalen Hurts in the second round, when you took a quarterback in the second round? We've lived through this already. And the Eagles have acted in the dumbest, the most impulsive, erratic, and irrational manner that I've ever seen, really, from a team. Because this is just dumbfounding. This absolutely baffles me to hear this type of story, because when we look at where the Eagles were situated, they had the number 6 overall pick this year. If you were really considering drafting a quarterback as an insurance plan to Jalen Hurts, why would you trade that number 6 overall pick to the Miami Dolphins? If you truly didn't feel, or if you truly felt that Jalen Hurts was your long-term solution, or at least could hold down the ship, could hold down the fort for you until you drafted another quarterback, why would you move back in the draft to take a worse player or worse quarterback when potentially, if you were sitting at number 6, you could have drafted a Justin Fields, a Trey Lance, or potentially a Mac Jones with that pick? Now it's not guaranteed that one of those guys will even drop to number 12. So I'm just dumbfounded. I'm dumbfounded by the way that they've acted. And when we think about what accelerated the debacle in Philadelphia, what led to their demise, and what ultimately led to Carson Wentz being shipped out of there, is when they drafted Jalen Hurts in the second round. And what happened? What manifested? His confidence was shot because ownership and the front office, they were sending a message, and the head coach were sending a message to him that, hey, we have reservations about whether you can return to form, whether you can return to your MVP status, whether you can stay healthy, whether you can be a competent and good quarterback in the NFL. And so all those reservations that they had about Carson Wentz is what prompted them to draft Jalen Hurts. And now they're doing the exact same thing because it's just this toxic culture and this uneven power structure. In fact, there was a report that came out this morning about how the owner, Jeffrey Lurie, and their GM, Howie Roseman, they treated Doug Peterson, the former head coach, like a baby. They ridiculed and criticized every single decision that he made. And so no wonder you can't flourish in a situation like that. And I would think that teams would learn from their previous mistakes. And again, when we think about what ultimately led to Carson Wentz being shipped out of there, it's because his confidence was shot. And so his skills and his stats, they all dwindled last year because there was a lack of trust between the front office, ownership, and the head coach and Carson Wentz. The lack of trust is what created that schism between the two. And now they're doing the exact same thing with Jalen Hurts. And it's a shame because Jalen Hurts just came out. Jalen Hurts just came out. He came out on the Adam Schefter podcast yesterday, or a couple days ago, and he talked about what the Carson Wentz trade meant for him and his confidence moving forward. And he even said, quote, "It shows the trust and what they think I can be as a player, so I want to prove them wrong." And I get it. Jalen Hurts didn't have the most eye-popping numbers last year. I understand that. And he played in 15 games, started for only passed for like 1,061 yards, 6 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, completed a poor a meager 52% of his passes. I understand that. But the guy still showed flashes of potential. I mean, that game against the Arizona Cardinals, there were moments he came in, he beat the Saints when they appeared to be unbeatable midway through the season. There were moments he showed flashes of real potential. And again, not that I think necessarily Jalen Hurts is the long-term solution, but if you even wanted to give him a chance, you can't come out and publicly say, oh, we're going to draft a quarterback, because now what type of message does that send to Jalen Hurts? How are you going to go back to Jalen Hurts? How are you going to approach him and reassure him that you are the guy moving forward when you gave that same exact speech, when you sent the same exact message to Carson Wentz before you shipped him out of there and demoted him midway through the season? Just makes no sense to me. And I guess the only thing that I can understand is I understand that they're wanting to be coy about this number 12 overall pick, perhaps to feign interest in taking a quarterback so that maybe they can have more leverage. I guess. I don't know if teams are going to fall for that, but just baffles me the way that they've acted recently. Just baffles me. I mean, again, it's one thing to micromanage, but then for there to be just a lack of transparency, a lack of trust, and to not literally look back a year earlier to how you handled a situation and to actually experience deja vu, that rarely happens. Rarely happens, and we're experiencing that right now. Okay, final topic of the day, my Malkin's moments. Got a couple great Malkin's moments for you. First of all, I talked about this with the Masters. Hideki Matsuyama became the first Japanese man and golfer to win a major in men's golf. Just a fantastic tournament that he had, won by 1 stroke over Will Zalatoris. And what's actually really amazing is that 10 years ago, he was the low amateur at the 2011 Masters. So, and now he wins 10 years later the actual Augusta National Masters tournament. Just a tremendous accomplishment for someone that now, again, blazing the trail for more non-American athletes to win this coveted award. Truly spectacular. And then Jose Musgrove for the Padres, the San Diego Padres, the pitcher for the San Diego Padres, he threw out his first no-hitter in the Padres' 53 season history in a 3-0 win over the Rangers. Just again, whenever pitchers accomplish rare history, I feel like it's worth noting. It's always noteworthy because it rarely happens. And again, in this franchise's history, 50 years, no one was ever able to accomplish this, and Musgrove comes in and does it. Just a tremendous feat. Enes Kanter of the Portland Trailblazers recorded 30 rebounds, 24 points, and 30 rebounds, setting the Portland Trailblazers franchise record for most rebounds in a game in a win over the Detroit Pistons. And this was a guy who had already had a career best 26 rebounds before, and he actually bested Sidney Wick's Portland record of 27 rebounds set in 1975. So Kanter is now the 4th player with 30 rebounds in a game over the past 20 seasons. He joins Dwight Howard, who did it in 2018, Andrew Bynum, who did it in 2012, and Kevin Love, who did it in 2011. This is the final Malkin's moment. And the Charlotte Hornets played the Atlanta Hawks last night. And this dunk by Miles Bridges put Clint Capella basically in a chokehold, just sent him to sleep. This almost seemed criminal. Miles Bridges should be maybe charged criminally for this, because he posterized Clint Capella so badly. This was one of the most incredible dunks in-game dunks that I've ever seen. I'm pulling this up right now to show you. He cocked it back so far, took off beyond the restricted section, and just dunked all over Clint Capella. And I'm pulling this up. I want to pull this up for you right now, because this was just, again, one of those dunks. Yeah, find it for you. Let's see, where is this? This is going to come to me. I'm going to find it. In the meantime, DeMar DeRozan, as I'm finding this, DeMar DeRozan hit a jumper with half a second remaining to sink the Mavericks and win in overtime. That was a fantastic finish. DeMar DeRozan has been really sensational all season. This is a guy who I thought should have been a borderline all-star. We didn't get a chance to see that. He didn't make the all-star game, but this was a guy who I thought was for sure deserving of it. And so for me, as I use this as a transition, I want to share this video of Miles Bridges' dunk over Clint Capella. Again, this might put him to sleep, because this was absolutely filthy right here. So I'm pulling this up. Let's play this. Wow. So that So that was one of my Malkin's moments as well. Miles Bridges with a fantastic finish. That's all the time that I got for you today. Thank you so much for joining me here on Morning Joe every Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. And I got big news. Make sure to tune in on Wednesday. I'm going to promote it on my social media platforms. I'm having a special up-and-coming basketball player that will be joining the show on Wednesday, Ryan Terrell. He's been garnering interest from the NBA, has had a tremendous season, and has a really interesting backstory. You're going to want to make sure to tune in for that. Again, as always, subscribe to my YouTube page, Morning Joe with Jonah Malkin on YouTube. Follow me on Instagram, on Twitter, across social media. And as always, have a lovely rest of your morning.